Listen closely. In Brussels, finance ministers are sketching billion-euro rearmament bonds. In Dallas, Lockheed workers stare at assembly lines that could soon idle. And on Wall Street, traders whisper that the dollar's exorbitant privilege might finally be up for auction. All of this turmoil traces back to one sentence from President Trump. Spend 5% of your GDP on defense or we come home. How did that single threat send tremors from Polish tank factories to the Federal Reserve? Could America's own security industry, its diplomatic clout, and even the greenback in your wallet become collateral damage if Europe decides to go it alone? In the previous video, we explored whether Europe can successfully defend itself without America's military might, asking whether it was time for a European army. Stay with us till the end of this one as we follow the money, the jobs, and the power, east across the Atlantic and back, to uncover what the United States could really lose when its oldest allies start saying, "Thanks, but we've got this." From leverage to liability, the 9 pillars. For 75 years, Washington has written the security rules of the Western world. NATO's Article 5, American bases on German soil, aircraft carriers named for presidents. Together, they formed a safety net so reliable that Europeans felt safe underspending on defense while overspending on social programs. Trump's 5% doctrine flips that script. On paper, it shrinks the U.S. burden and forces Europeans to pay more for their own defense. In practice, though, American hard power is funded, legitimized, and multiplied by Europe's dependence. Snap that bond and 9 pillars of U.S. influence begin to wobble. The first pillar is cash flow. The United States supplies about 43% of all arms traded worldwide, and Europe is now its single largest regional buyer. Over the past decade, European orders for American hardware, from F-35 fighters to Patriot missile batteries, have more than doubled. Lockheed Martin alone collects roughly $20 billion a year from European customers, nearly 40% of its foreign sales. If Brussels channels its new defense spending into a Buy European program, directing rearmament bonds toward Eurofighter upgrades, Franco-German missile shields, and Spanish drones, those dollars stop crossing the Atlantic. The moment European factories spin up, every euro that lands in an Airbus, Leonardo, or Rheinmetall account is a dollar that never reaches Fort Worth or St. Louis. Pillar 2, American jobs and economies. Defense is not a Beltway cocktail party. It is 2.21 million American paychecks, averaging more than $110,000 apiece. Most of those jobs live deep in the supply chain, in anodizing shops in Ohio, composite fiber weavers in Alabama, and precision gear cutters in Arizona. European export orders act as oxygen. Remove them, and the subcontractor network suffocates long before prime contractors feel the pain. The shock lands first in counties where defense is the single best route to a middle-class wage, turning an abstract foreign policy gambit into a flashing political alarm at home. Pillar 3, research leadership and standards. Innovation leadership is partly subsidized by export volume. When foreign air forces queue for the F-35, they help finance stealth laboratories in Palmdale and AI flight control code in Boston. If Europe builds its own 6th-generation ecosystem, Washington loses more than royalties. It loses the right to set the pace. 2 projects are already racing ahead. French, German, and Spanish officials report steady progress on the Future Combat Air System, while the UK, Italy, Japan Global Combat Air Program plans a demonstrator flight before 2027. These initiatives spawn European supply webs, stealth coatings from Toulouse, and quantum-secure communications from Munich, outside America's export control umbrella. In just a few years, Brussels could license critical components to countries that once bought exclusively from the United States. Pillar 4, diplomatic leverage. American troops stationed in Europe are more than bodyguards. They are bargaining chips. Bases such as Ramstein and Aviano double as leverage when U.S. diplomats push for sanctions on Iran or for naval escorts in the Red Sea. If Europe achieves genuine strategic autonomy, those bases become negotiable real estate rather than permanent fixtures. The Pentagon's crisis response radius shrinks, and the State Department loses the quiet clout that comes from writing Europe's security check. Pillar 5. Dollar dominance and sanctions. Hard power props up financial power. Analysts at the Atlantic Council warn that dollar primacy is intertwined with America's security guarantees. European strategic autonomy plans explicitly call for euro clearing systems immune to U.S. secondary sanctions and for a defense industrial base insulated from American export rules. As procurement ties loosen, European exposure to Treasury Department pressure diminishes. Each contract settled in euros instead of dollars chips away at the network effect that keeps the greenback unrivaled. Pillar 6. Intelligence access and interoperability. Buying American brings more than hardware. It comes with software updates, encryption keys, and data links that let U.S. agencies peer into friendly networks. A switch to homegrown systems allows Brussels to demand sovereign cloud hosting and end-to-end encryption under EU law. Washington then faces a dilemma: relax its grip on sensitive tech to keep the customer, or tighten export rules and watch the customer walk away. Pillar 7. Global market share battles. Europe will not simply stop buying American, it will start selling against American primes. With more than €1 billion already earmarked for collaborative defense R&D in 2025 alone, the European Union is positioning itself as a competitor in everything from hypersonic missiles to medium-lift helicopters. Imagine an Indian tender where a Franco-German weapon underbids a U.S. equivalent by 20%, with no ITAR strings attached. In Latin America, a Spanish-built helicopter offering local offset jobs eclipses a Sikorsky bid hamstrung by U.S. export rules. Washington soon finds itself in a commercial dogfight with allies who enjoy smoother diplomacy and fewer political constraints. Pillar 8. Budget shock at home. Nearly half of America's discretionary spending already flows to the Pentagon. Lawmakers justify that bill by pointing to export receipts and lower unit costs. Take Europe off the customer list, and programs like the next-generation air dominance fighter confront brutal arithmetic. Fewer airframes must absorb the same research bill, pushing unit prices so high that even the Air Force hesitates. Congress then faces a three-way choice: raise taxes, borrow more, or cancel flagship projects, none of which makes for an easy campaign speech. Pillar 9. The alliance narrative. Power also lives in stories. For decades, NATO symbolized a promise that democracies stand shoulder to shoulder. No invoice required. Reduce that promise to a subscription service, and the moral authority Washington projects from Taipei to Nairobi dims. If Europe, the original beneficiary of U.S. generosity, walks away, why should Southeast Asia trust American guarantees? Soft power is fragile. Once a story fractures, it is devilishly hard to repair. Could America still come out ahead? There is a sunnier scenario. If Europeans finally meet higher spending targets, U.S. forces could pivot more aggressively to the Indo-Pacific, and the shock of competition might ignite a new technology renaissance. Low-cost drone swarms, quantum-resilient networks, and rapid prototyping that outpaces any complacent monopoly. Realizing that upside, however, demands skillful diplomacy, targeted subsidies, and a clear industrial policy. Those outcomes rarely materialize from overnight ultimatums. History shows that alliances grow slowly and fracture fast. The real cost of walking away. The 5% ultimatum landed like a negotiating tactic, yet its long-term impact could resemble a forced divorce. Tens of thousands of high-skill American jobs stand at risk as export pipelines dry up. The United States could suffer a cascading loss of influence inside European parliaments and war rooms, a gradual erosion of dollar centrality as allies hedge against U.S. leverage, and a shrinking intelligence reach in an arms market suddenly crowded with European options. All these tangible setbacks weaken the scaffolding that supports superpower status. Allies are not mere customers of American security. They are co-investors in American power. Push them hard enough, and they will redirect their capital toward themselves. When that happens, the boomerang arcs back across the Atlantic and strikes the very foundations Washington seeks to reinforce: economic strength, technological edge, and geopolitical reach. The crucial question, then, is not whether Europe can afford to spend 5% of its GDP on defense. The question is whether America can afford the consequences if Europe chooses to spend that money somewhere other than Fort Worth, Huntsville, or San Diego. If you value clear-eyed looks at the crossroads of money and geopolitics, hit the subscribe button, ring that bell icon to get notified of our next video, and let us know in the comments, is Trump's NATO 5% doctrine a brilliant brinkmanship or a bargain the United States can't afford to close? That's it from us on this episode of Nexus-Feed. Until our next one, stay curious, stay critical, and keep safe.